Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this roundtable that is going to take us on the theme of RSSI, Take Your Board on Board. Many companies consider the cyber risk as a non-business priority, as not a business priority. Many cyber attacks have hit now SMEs and large groups alike. And with the health crisis and the hybrid mode of working, the wind seems to be changing towards a better taking on board of this risk. And to deal with this topic, it is my pleasure to welcome Delia Kader, who RSSIs for Swiss Life Luxembourg. Delia is English-speaking, so she will be answering in English, but the rest of the roundtable will be in French. We also welcome Antoine Bachelet, who is assigned NR, and also member of the CLUSIF, Xavier Dart, who is the Sales and Engineering Manager of Proofpoint, and Paul Bale, who is Head of Security and Group Chief Security Officer at Atos. So I will start with you, Antoine. So according to you, our board of directors, they call them COMEX for the time being, have these taken the measure of the cyber risk? Well, to start with, at NR, the COMEX has been sensitized and is aware for many years, of the cyber risk and is not waited to take it on board. Concerning other companies, and through the contact of my counterparts exclusive, the situation varies from one headquarters to another, to being a topic to just being alone in the desert to advocate this kind of aspect. So first of all, there is the omnipresence of the realizing of the cyber risk in the media. So COMEX can ignore that from a generologic point of view, and then take into account the cyber risk and the impact on certain companies when a neighboring company is being attacked, or sometimes an audit from the statutory auditors, and the worst, of course, an attack that we have suffered with the reality of the impact during several weeks on the company's activity, then the awareness is immediate. Delia, I'm going to ask it in French, and you're going to answer in English. So do COMEXs take this risk into account?
They're getting better. They're getting more aware, for sure. Are they taking it into account? It's a hard question to answer yes or no. Basically because the cyber threats generally are dynamically moving quickly and so on. And basically the general idea today from everyone, whether it being in the board or being a CISO or being even a simple employee in the company, is being adaptive to the changes. So building the culture to be more aware that we need to adapt to new threats that come and change on daily. And you said it with the COVID and with the remote working, suddenly overnight we had to adjust to a different way of working. The idea would be being adaptable to change, being dynamic to change. And to do that, you need the board or the CEO or the management, the decision makers, to put in their agenda cybersecurity on a frequent basis. But also you need from the security people, so the CISOs, to be able to articulate and communicate the problems in a way that is understandable to the different decision makers and key players of a company, basically.
Xavier, what is your point of view on this? Well, I have this specific position of being a software publisher. One of our missions is to provide RSSIs the elements to provide this visibility to COMEXs. So unfortunately, during COVID, the news shed light on RSSIs with the ransomware that we saw. Certain hackers took advantage of this difficult time to exacerbate their attacks. And therefore, the COMEXs have realized the work done on RSSIs and we supplied all these elements of visibility, so we'll see that later, but in terms of risks, in terms of what was blocked, what was put to the side, and who are the people targeted, and who are, for most of them, in high-flying attacks, people who are sitting at the COMEX. Paul, you have the double hat of being in charge of security for Atos, but you also have clients, a lot of clients. Absolutely, yes. We have clients, and if I protect Atos, it's to protect our clients. Of course, since we are a service company, what we've seen over the last 3 years has influenced significantly the level of awareness of the COMEX, because in the various BUs, they could see what was happening with their clients, and since 2019, there has been attacks of an unprecedented level that really helped raising the awareness. So the level of awareness of COMEXs is something that we dealt with, and we have the exec committee that is going to decide on the ways to protect the organization on cybersecurity topics. And we have the security strategy, which is discussed at the board of directors. And we have a level of awareness of the COMEX and the board of directors that's very strong. That comes from listening to clients, see what's happening with our competitors on the market, and that helps with raising the awareness and attention. And the first advice I give to CISO is to examine what is happening in the environment to help with raising the awareness, because the COMEX is aware and naturally made aware by the events I just mentioned, but will never be made aware enough. And it is a role of CISO to give elements to make people understand what is happening in the environment, in the various sectors of the market, and maintain this level of permanent awareness to all the members of the COMEX. We are now going to see the conditions that help RSSIs fulfill the message. I'll come back to you, Antoine. What should be the contents of the mandate of the RSSIs? Well, to talk generally, the mandate of RSSI is to identify, manage, and maintain the risk at an acceptable level for the organization. When I'm talking about the risk, it's the risks, plural, and the acceptable level depends on the level of residual risk for each of these that depend on the activity and the awareness of what the organization is processing. So this level of acceptable risk should be validated by the top management of the company. Well, if it is validated explicitly by the management, given the importance of each business, it is the desired situation that should be targeted by the RSSI for its mandate to be supported by the top management. In terms of budget, what should be the budget of this? Mr. Poupard talked in 2018 to really quick and dirty idea of between 5 and 10% of the budget of a structure. So it gives you an idea of how important. It's not 50%, it's not 1%, but what is not said here is that what should we count into that? What is the scope of this budget? What is the share project? What is the maintenance of security conditions? And how far do we go? Antiviruses on workstations, yes. Backup, yes, maybe. If we talk about the availability, maybe the air conditioning of the clean rooms, that could vary from one organization to another. So it's difficult to give you an idea of how much that is, of a percentage. That should be the golden rule. Delia, from your experience, what are the conditions that help RSSIs fulfill their missions? And first, based on the mandate?
Basically, okay. So when you're saying missions of for security, I have to agree that it really depends on the industry. So the first mission or the first task, I would say, is for the CISO to understand the business of their industry very well, understand what are their digital assets, what are the risks there, what is critical for the business to continue, what is not. So if you bring different CISOs from different industries, be it a CISO in academia, a CISO in finance, a CISO in a giant tech, whatever, and you ask them about the mission, it should, basically there will be an overlap, but it should be different according to the industry they serve. It should be integrated in the industry they serve. So basically coming to the budget point, yeah, 10% sounds a reasonable number, but what if it's a startup? What if it's a small, medium business? Can we start with a 5%? This is basically a risk appetite question. And obviously, the management should be involved in the decision of the risk appetite to calculate risk accordingly. And the role then becomes for the CISO, and the most important element is to present the risk in that language. So I think all CISOs will have to agree that the overlap part is understanding your business, understanding where you stand.
Xavier, même question.
Xavier, the same question from your publisher's point of view. Well, I look at this, of course, from my software publisher's angle to deal with the protection of data. I'm not really competent at all in terms of backup or air conditioning, but for us, it is the protection of data that is our business. So very quickly, we have a listening ear of the COMEX, because we know through the news we can give concrete financial impacts on the attacks that could happen and be suffered by these companies. So I would say we want the mandate to be as wide as possible around this protection data. We also have a part that concerns raising the awareness that is sometimes earmarked for human resources, but the CSO is going to pilot this training to educate and help the colleagues to be the first hurdle against cyber. There are a few aspects towards this raising the awareness. We're going to show them on the screen. So it's more like a report that that's showing them what we call the very attack people. So who are the this is what we have some logos that actually underline the VIPs. So probably everyone in the comics, it belongs to those VIP lists. So we have very quickly the attention. And we also work on what happens in terms of supplies as well, because you can see the scope of protection is going to opt to look at all the interactions with supplies. On the one that is further, we also better understand what hackers do. It's good to block attacks, but what's going to interest the COMEX is to update it, upgrade it on who is going to. We are targeted by such a country, for example. When there is a state support, we can present it. What are the targets in the company, as we've seen earlier, and how am I attacked, depending on my industry, my peers, my competitors, it's different. But also in terms of cyber, it's quite similar. So we often say that these dashboards will help steer the boat, but also looking at what's on the sea. Yeah, just like in international waters, you have a number of submarines, but you don't necessarily see them. So the dashboards we supply the CISO, we have under the level of the water what is happening. We are well protected, but it may happen that we are attacked like the ones I'm presenting now. Very well, thank you for this side presentation. What should be the mandate of the CISO? Well, for us, it's very simple. We are a support function, like just our HR or finance. So I have about 100 colleagues who are security officers. They're not operational people, to cover 100,000 colleagues in 74 countries, and their mission is to protect Atos. So we have an obligation of protection of Atos, even if in our budget we don't have, for example, access control, which remains the facility management. Our objective is to define the implementation of access control and implement them in the various sites we are positioned. We have this obligation of protection very simply in all the cyber and physical safety and crisis management. We have to report to the group and to the exec board on the proper implementation of security checks. So it's either in our budget, we have the SOC, the CSIRT, and all the IT, and in the levels of water tightness to prevent. So we cover the whole of the scope, whether the services are delivered by security as a support function or by the business entity. So these dashboards are key elements, and I agree with the fact that we have an issue with the visibility of the scope, and the level of complexity to protect from attackers is unprecedented. So ensuring the implementation of hundreds of checks in the whole environment, and when the checks are not all implemented by our organization, but by entities, the complexity level is very strong, and it requires to implement dashboarding, connecting the tools together, and translating towards the XCOM. Because the level of security, do we have the right level of security, or do we need to improve? Should we ask for complementary extra budget? Should we ask the business to implement some complementary level of security? That's the whole challenge of CISOs. Antoine, you wanted to react? Well, actually, yes. When we talk about the level, the share of budget, it doesn't mean that this budget is steered by the CISO directly. It is the share dedicated to security and spread between admin, HR for raising awareness, and data centers for production, and CISO for the operation center. But it's the whole of the budget dedicated, or nearly all dedicated, to security. So it is based on this that we're going to report to the COMEX, and not just on the part that we directly. Dalia, you wanted to react?
One thing that happens frequently with the budget, basically, is the panic versus pre-planned or pre-preparation. So, for example, when mentioning this, if you hear a company, a sister company, or a company that is competing with your own, having a cyber attack of a certain time, suddenly basically focus becomes on it across the whole neighborhood, let's say, while it might not necessarily be the highest risk in your industry or in your company. So budget, in that sense, the integration of it, again, I'm saying integration of it within the business, and the pre-planning is a healthier way to do it than the panicking attitude, the firefighter attitude, basically.
Alors, Paul, sur le budget.
Oui,
Actually, I wanted to react on this distribution of the budget. All the CISOs know here is that we want to the management of vulnerability that is part of our daily jobs, because we have vulnerabilities that expose the security of the environment regardless of the security measures. And typically, the application of security correctives is not in the CISO's budget. And sometimes we have some growing needs of responses to correct these vulnerabilities that are more and more critical. And this is every week. So here we're talking about giving visibility to the members of the board of operations in IT, but also in business units, to protect themselves if in reasonable terms with the right possibilities, patch in due time, and this is absolutely essential. And I think that the top management of all companies should understand that, understand if there's fear responsibility, they are in a capacity to correct within acceptable time the vulnerability, and the CISO to raise the alarm if it's not done in due time and report it at the highest level, because the consequences of the company could be significant in case these best practices are not followed or not applied. I totally agree. We've seen the mandate, the budget, and now let's see the entity you report to. So CISO, who should CISO report to ideally to fulfill its mission the best as possible? Antoine? If we imagine a company where the core business is the supply of digital services, it may be necessary that the CISO has a seat in the board, and then the entity for reporting, it could be directly reporting to the CEO. But then, if I take my case, I report to the information, the chief information officer, and since I'm autonomous in my actions, it's not an issue to report to the IT officer. I have experienced that on an organization where the level of maturity in cybersecurity is very low or is just starting, because the issues are immediately very operational, it could be legitimate or desirable that at first the CISO is directly reporting to the IT department, because the teams will have their hands in the engine for the first level. Delia, do you share this vision?
I do. I do too. So basically I do, but there is the theory and there is the practice. And the theory, there is a lot of saying position A has a conflict of interest with position B, so we should not report directly to it, and it's more apparent when it comes to the CISO or to even the data protection officer, etc. And indeed, there is sometimes conflict and interest. But then you have the practice, and the practice is there are elements that come that you didn't account for. One is size of team. Other is basically, as you said, with the operational, sometimes if your weaker point is the operational element, or your assets basically are, the digital assets are your most important element, then maybe working hands in hands with the CTO is not the worst nightmare as described in theory or whatever. So there is the practice and there is the theory, and when it comes to practice, what matters at the end of the day is the individuals. So how much would the person you're reporting to can handle those conflict of interest, how much security aware they are, how much can they pause and think and say, okay, actually, there is a point there. That is what matters most in reality, and therefore a recipe that works for one company will not work for another company.
Je pose la même question, Xavier.
I'm asking the same question, Xavier. With my angle of a software publisher, I totally agree with what Delia said just now. The size of the team is going to be very important on the impact and the method used and the speed of reaction to stop hackers. It's not proactive in that case, but reactive. And this is something that should be taken in a positioning the CISO. And I will add what we mentioned earlier on. My point of view here would be to say the bigger the visibility, the better it will be to defend ideas, budget, and the measures recommended in case of attack. Paul? Well, I have reported to several managers at Atos, at the exec board, to the general secretary, finance director, internal audit manager, today big data and cybersecurity manager. So I've seen the pros and cons of all, but there's not good or bad reporting. I think it's important. You have to adapt to the organization, understand the context of the organization, and be in a position to use the reporting to go forward. The boss of internal audit, we can there may be a conflict of interest, but also give access to the board of directors in the audit committee. And if we use it, we could obtain a strong support in the implementation of a security policy. Reporting to the big data and cybersecurity director, I buy some services from them as well, but we have a common objective. An impact on Atos would be a catastrophe for the activities, and therefore I'm listened carefully by this activity, and we have a client-supplier type of relationship. So the General Secretary gave other access to the CEO of the organization. So you have to adapt and take advantage as much as possible from the reporting. Now, connecting only to the IT department could be a conflict of interest, but I have some clients, I'm in contact with the CISOs of clients who are reporting to the IT department, and all is going well. There's a very good interaction between the IT department and CISOs, and I've seen bad interactions as well. So, as Dalia said, it's between theory and practice. There is theory, and then you have to have good practices in organization, know your organization, the managers, how they can support you, and be in a position to use them properly. What's interesting is that in your case, you've been connected to the various entities. What are the pros and cons on each? Well, it depends on the individuals. Security really depends on humans and how aware they are, how sensitive they are to security. So it's up to the CISO to understand the management, and all the presentations in the exec board or the board of directors is you have to see the profiles of the various members, the capacity to listen to security issues or raise their interest on that. So more than the function itself, it's going to be the people who will need to be taken aboard in explaining the challenges, the risks, the risk analysis, to be in a position to translate the impacts. With the finance director, we are going to talk a lot about finances, obviously. With an internal audit manager, we'll talk about risk analysis and contribution to the IRM approach of the company, mapping the risks. And with the cybersecurity manager, we'll review the aspects of cyber coverage, and therefore you have to adapt. We have to be chameleons in our organization, still keeping in mind the objective of this mandate should be very clear, try to protect what is the mission, what is the mandate, how far can we go. And we're talking about the risk appetite. As we said, we have all understood that you can no longer accept risks that were acceptable a few years back. Should be a strong message at the COMEX. We could discuss about the risk appetite. We begin less and less talk about that. Who would like to take the risk today of having significant impacts in the organization? So our job is to convey that message in the BUs to say that there are risks that we cannot take anymore in our organization.
So before moving on to the next issue, and does the CISO should be part of the Board of Administration, Board of Directors? Do you have anything to say? No? Should the CISO be part of the Board of Directors, have a seat on the board? Well, I think that it depends on the estimated level of impact for the risk analysis for a cyber attack with regards to the company's activities. If the activities rely on the digital tools without having cybersecurity measures in place, then yes, it would definitely justify this decision. Dalia.
I'm in favor of it in the sense that it helps both ways. It helps not just to communicate what cybersecurity threats exist and what are the vulnerabilities in the company, etc., etc. It also helps in the CISO learning and integrating in the business priorities. So when you're sitting into the room where decisions are made, even if you don't have to necessarily be part of the committee, but be frequently invited to it, then you not only do you bring into the table the security, but you also understand the priority, and you could start fitting those priorities within the security needs. So your suggestions when you're presenting a business case for a certain security control, or when you're trying to justify a security decision with a return of investment, you're speaking the same language of the company by understanding how the decision is made within the company. So I am in favor of it. If it's not directly sitting in the committee, then there has to be a forum to replace it, but I'm in favor with such strong communication between the CISO and the decision makers of the company.
Oui, et sans parler de siège.
We're not talking about a permanent seat, or at least this is what I was talking about. NR is certified, has been certified for 7 years, and so at least once a year we have a review being organized with the board of directors, and of course there is a presentation being made on the level of security. It could be a strong lever for the SISOs if their presentation is focused on risks, evolutions, on security. Is the level of support sufficient? And then the board of directors will be able to reject or accept the new plan, this new security plan drafted by the CISOs. And the CISOs will receive the support that they need over time. To me, it's once, twice, or 3 times per year. If there are issues requiring my presence, I can, for example, represent cyber resilience issues when one of our colleagues has been cyber attacked. So it's a direction review. Why? Right? This is how you call it. Yes, it's a good opportunity to share and convey messages. And the CISOs can use this committee to pilot their strategies in terms of information system security. I would like to add on what Dalia said. The more, the better. We're not talking about permanent seats, but we will have to anticipate what's going to happen. So we need to communicate on what's happening within the area, within the industry, and we really have to raise awareness. We don't have to wait for issues to arise to talk about the security items. Here's an example I can share with you. Instead of having the board of directors contacting the CISOs about a cyber attack perpetrated against a competitor, it should be the other way around. The board of directors should be able to say, okay, I've heard about the attack and the CISOs have anticipated this risk, and so now we are able to manage this risk because the CISOs have been able to anticipate the risk, whether they have a permanent seat on the board or not. What do you think about it? I think we need to be very careful because the board of directors has a lot to deal with. Cybersecurity is paramount. I'm not here to say otherwise, but I think that we need to make sure that the CISOs are not present at all meetings all the time, because the CISOs have to do their job and they need to request a meeting if they have an issue to deal with. You need to get prepared. You can't organize a meeting every week, and so the CISOs have to think about the messages that they want to convey, the requests that will be formulated. You will need to have a request if you want to talk with the board of directors. I think that the awareness strategy is quite natural in our industry because we know what's going on, we have a look at the market, and so they are aware of the challenges. The CISOs need to prepare their interventions, they need to have specific requests, and after the meeting, they need to have fulfilled their needs, they need to have answers to their questions, they need to work on their strategy. So I think that too frequent meetings are enough and can be counterproductive. They need to give an update on the company strategies to see what are the trends, when is the right time to introduce new topics. It's not always a good moment within the life of the industry and the company. If it's more than 2, 3, 4 times a year, I think it's too much. I think it's better to work in a more efficient manner, and once we've been able to make decisions, we need to implement the decisions, so there's a lot of work to carry out. We can, for example, draw lessons from the previous decisions that have been made. So I think twice a year or 3 times a year could be a good compromise. Do you agree on what Paul said? This is what we're doing in practice, basically. So I totally agree with this idea. What about you, Dalia?
Okay, it again depends also on the size of the company too, and on the risks that the company has to face and the obligations the company has, whether be it business or like towards clients, or whether be it obligations from a regulation point of view, etc., etc. So the frequency has to be balanced. That's why we kind of all agreed that it doesn't have to be in every committee meeting that we're attending. So the frequency has to be balanced. At the end of the day, the workload has to also be addressed. So we all know how much it is heavy when you're having so many meetings, that to achieve the actual work becomes a challenge. But it has to be what I would like to reach with whatever company I work with or worked with before, is reaching a point where every single employee, be it the most recent intern to all the way up to the CEO, asking the right questions when it comes to security. That would be the awareness, that they don't have to be aware of how to solve, but rather how to be alerted, how to be and who they need to contact when they have that right question, you know. And that's the awareness, and I think communication is key here. So yeah, frequency may be debatable depending on the business, but the need is there regardless of the business.
Non, c'est bon. Okay.
Some companies have implemented cyber boards of directors, even though that's not the case in your companies. What do you think about those bodies in charge of cybersecurity? I'll start. We have the yearly review center. So this is a similar body that we have created. We are not focusing only on cybersecurity issues, but this is an occasion for us to have a look at the needs, the support that we need to implement. So per se, this is a cyber board of directors. So we don't have any cyber board of directors, but as I said earlier, cybersecurity is paramount to us. And I'm not sure whether it is useful to have a dedicated board of directors for cybersecurity. We have direction reviews with different delegations. And so this is necessary to remain compliant with the ISO certifications. This is nothing that we currently have. It doesn't mean that we need to make progress on this and to make decisions. But we don't feel like it's something that we need right now. Dalia.
I think, again, it depends on the organization, because it's very linked to the previous question, should the CISO sit in the comics? And if there is seen that this is the communication that would replace sitting in the comics and listening to the decision, it might be a good alternative. There is an implicit message there when you have such a thing, when you're telling your employees that this is how much security means to us as a company. So there is an implicit message there. But is it needed versus sitting in the committee? That's, again, it depends on size, on risk, on a communication obviously is needed, some sort of communication, and it should not be a dry communication. It should be really sitting on the same table and discussing and planning and etc. But the form of it doesn't really matter much as long as it's effective. So that's my thoughts on it.
Xavier, vous vouliez réagir?
Oui, encore une fois, ça...
Any reaction, Xavier? Yes. It depends on the internal organizations of the companies. All companies have their own organization. We've seen that with our organization, and we had financial companies, banking sectors, and it's more feasible in this sector, but it shouldn't be as easy in other sectors. It depends on the level of technicity of information. It can evolve over time. As Paul said, when you're talking with a general director, you're not going to address the same issues and you're not going to use the same level of technicity. So you really need to adapt your communication depending on the organization, and to me the messages remain the same. We need to anticipate and we need to raise awareness around cybersecurity, whatever the format being used. We're going to broaden the debate of this roundtable. We have 16 minutes left. What are the other forms of organizations that information systems can take so that the information systems communication can be deployed as much as possible? I think we need to rely on the general direction. It's paramount. If we can also insert a new mission in all the management positions so that all the managers can safeguard the security of the information systems, it can fit in the whole hierarchy, and it's a type of organization that will decentralize part of the work, and it's going to mobilize a lot of people. If it's part of their missions, we've talked about individual data, personal data. When we manage banking information on a daily basis, it should be part of everyone's missions to protect the data. And it's a way to decentralize the work related to cybersecurity within the organization. So we need everyone to be involved in this area, everyone to be interested in this. Yes, it also needs to be attached to needs and objectives to fulfill. Do you agree, Dalia?
Yeah, so for that, I like the word community work. Security is kind of like a community work. In the organization, a CISO, no matter how good they are or not, you will never hear a success story without hearing the CISO did this, but the CEO did this, but the communication team did this. It involves everyone. And it's that kind of sense of community within the organization first that needs to be built. So we can come up with concepts like ambassadors, like cybersecurity ambassadors with the different teams. We can come up with a concept like a data protection community or champions, whatever it is, but somehow build a security-aware culture in the company and the organization. But I also don't think it stops there, and that's where the role of the CISO becomes critical. The community has to expand beyond the organization, which is the tricky part today. So an incident is out to happen for any institution at a certain point. The idea would be a community where we kind of come straight forward with incidents and sit together and say, this is the lesson learned we had. What are you doing about it? What are we doing about it? So somehow the community has to be external too. There are forums existing today outside that you can start with the country you're in, start with the forums in the country you're in, then start with the European forums that exist, etc., etc. But you have to be the CISO has to be the one building the bridge with that community, and building the community also together with the management of the organization within the organization. So everyone plays a certain level of role within their job description or job capacity.
C'est intéressant ce que dit Dalia. Paul.
Paul, so it's not only about the company. Cybersecurity is about the whole ecosystem as well. Yes, we are a supplier of a lot of different clients, and so we are involved in the supply chain of our clients, and this is paramount. We need to consider cybersecurity as a community. We are a support organization. We are supporting the organization. We've talked about the finance teams, the HR teams. They are also a huge support for the organization. We have our own budget, we have our own missions, and security officers are attached to the managerial positions. The managers can reject or adopt the approaches led by the security officers, same processes that we use at the HR level or at the finance level. We really need to know well the organization. We need to make sure that we have the right people at the right place in the organization, internally, externally. We really need to know the supply chain well, the different links, the suppliers. We need to know the suppliers well. We need to better share the initiatives that are carried out to secure the supply chain, because we are a supplier of another company or a service provider, or we are supported by another company. So we are part of the supply chain in some way. And it is vital to protect the whole supply chain. We're talking with networks of security offices, and we really need to know the security points of contact. We need to know who the suppliers are. We need to know what to do, what must be done when there is an issue arising. Xavier? And then you have the floor, Antoine. I agree with what Dalia said earlier with regards to the empowerment of all employees. At PowerPoint, we want to protect people and defend data. We want users to be the first barrier in terms of cybersecurity, and to do that, we help the CISOs in their mission. We can help them change the attitudes within the organization. We can encourage people to change their passwords. And we have to prevent them from using sticky notes with the password. And if collaborators need to do this, it's because the password is too complicated, so we need to use a new strategy. The emails, for example, collaborators really have to be very careful. Is the email similar to the emails that we receive, generally speaking, or are they different? Is it a spam? We really need also to have all the users on board to be the first barrier to cyber attacks. At Proofpoint, we are a partner of a lot of communities, and my colleagues will talk about this in a better way than I can. So the CISOs need, of course, when there is a crisis, but not only, we need to share the best practices. We also need to encourage this sharing of information, and we also need to focus on anticipating the future threats to come. Antoine, you wanted to react on what Paul said. Yes, I wanted to add on what he said. If we decentralize the missions and if other collaborators have new missions to fulfill, we'll be able to mobilize everyone, we'll be able to raise awareness around cybersecurity attacks. We need to make sure that the stakes are well understood at all levels of the organization, and this is the role of the CISO. And as a coordinator of the information systems at Inclusive, I can only agree with Paul. We really need to share information among companies that are specialized in cybersecurity. We really need to talk when there is an incident, when there is an attack. It is paramount. This way we can create synergies and we can see what other companies are doing. And sometimes we don't think of certain ideas. And so when we talk with other companies, we can have new ideas. So we have 5 minutes left. We've talked about awareness raising in the board of directors, because they are very often targeted by cyber criminals. So I wanted to get your feedback on this. In terms of awareness raising, we have products at our disposal that can help us anticipate what members of the board are doing. To us, they are targets of the awareness campaigns elaborated by the CISOs. We are going to share a lot of data on the risks, and it will help the members of the board to better understand the stakes, and the CISOs will adapt to the different members of the board depending on their missions. Sometimes we can attack the financial directors to get a wire transfer. So what can we do for finance directors? If they receive an email, how can we help them understand that this is a spam, that this is a cyber attack? So the CISOs need to adapt to the different roles of the members of the board, and they really need to adapt to the reactions towards the risks, because the risks can now have different forms. Are there any specific actions that needs to be implemented? Yes, first, we need to use anti-phishing tests, and the members of the board need to be involved in those tests. Do you feel like the board of administration falls in the trap more easily? Well, I'd say no, because now we have tests every 3 months. And I can say that we've made a lot of progress. We had 120,000 emails sent as tests every 3 months, and we are running tests continuously. What's remaining difficult is that we really need to target the boards of directors, and we need to use tricky emails as well. I don't think that the board of directors is the main target. I think they will be targeted by WhatsApp fraud more. And in those cases, we have punctual actions that can be very efficient, but they need to be implemented. And we also have to involve all the members of staff in the training sessions, in the tests. We also need to monitor the participation rates. The members of the board are not the collaborators that are the easiest to follow and monitor, but we really need to focus on the participation rates as well. Antoine, what about you? I am part of a smaller company, and during the direction review, we have organized awareness campaigns, and as Dalia said, we really need to know the different members of the board of directors, and individually we have to adapt to the members. We need to have an individual approach. We need to focus on the members of the members of the board of directors individually. The CISOs need to know the board of directors well so that the messages can come across.
I agree with everything that has been said. What I would add to that is, other than the importance of phishing campaigns and the importance of awareness to all employees, etc., what I would like to add to that is I would like to reach also a point, and I keep saying it to, at least today, to the Swiss Life employees, that they realize the importance of those awareness rather than us telling them, you have to attend, it's mandatory. And therefore, I kind of made it a promise to them that every awareness we give, there is something for them to take home to share with their family and friends, because being secure at home is also being secure at office. So it's not just the phishing campaign within the office, it's not just, there has to be an element there where they can go home and say to their kids or to their friends or whatever, did you know? Did you know that this is how a cyber attack can happen? And that way, the next training that takes place, it's not us saying it's mandatory, but rather them waiting for it somehow. That's one point that I try achieving on a personal level, and to kind of feel the success of it or not, it's interesting if after an awareness you hear the conversations near a coffee machine and you feel, yeah, they're talking about it. That means it's not anymore about, let's say in my case, Swiss Life. It's really about you as an individual, whoever that employee is and whatever place, location, job description they have. So that's one. Now for the executive, I do think there is a big, huge impact on executives being part of awarenesses and having specific awarenesses. Because again, it's the message. When we're having an awareness and you see the CEO sitting on the front seat, okay, lately it has been more remote than in rooms, but generally, if we have awarenesses and you see the CEO sitting in the front seat, that's a huge message. When you have a game-like awareness, you're putting efforts in making it fun, etc., and you see the team leaders or the team managers participating, you know, it's not just security anymore, it's a team-building activity suddenly that people look forward to. And that is where we're trying to change the culture, basically. That's where we're trying to change generally how we think and how we act about security overall.
Allez, il nous reste...
So we have 1 minute left. So to conclude, the theme of this session was to get your board on board. What would be the advice to share to all the listeners of today's session? I'm going to cite the European Cybersecurity Organization. You really need to follow our work. You need to get connected with the CISOs, and we can also dialogue and talk over the internet via email. Remain visible. You need to be communicating around your work. You need to raise awareness. You need to anticipate what's going to happen. Antoine? before going to the board, you need to get prepared. This is a test for you. You can lose everything or win everything in terms of credibility as well. So you need to synthesize things and you need to get prepared. Because a lot of people are going to want and enter the details. And so you need to get prepared so that you are ready to answer any question. Because this is the way the board of directors are working. If you're not prepared, don't go to the board of directors.
I think, yeah, I agree with that very much. Yeah, for sure. You need to speak the same language. You need to be prepared. You need to be logical with what you're requesting too. And probably I'll add to it that you need to also, because it's a difficult topic, especially when a CISO comes from a hugely technical background, you need to be human in the sense that you need to understand where the others are coming from and explain it in the way that fits their needs and their so being authentic, being human, and being transparent to the real situation, because also you don't want to reach a point where there is paranoia, people being paranoid, that defeats the purpose. So I would say transparent, authentic, and being as close as possible to the human side. At the end of the day, we're doing it for the individuals, and that would pay off for the companies anyway.
Merci, merci beaucoup à nos quatre intervenants, nos quatre invités. Je crois qu'on peut...
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you to our speakers. This is the end of the roundtable. Thank you again, everyone.